Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome back to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of all things books, booktube, anything else I want to talk about. Okay, so we'll start off this week by talking about my reading wrap-up. I've kind of gotten off to a slow start in June. Today is the 9th as I'm recording, and I've only completed 2 books. I'm in the middle of several books, as though I'm Sean the Book Maniac here. So the first book I completed was All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. Johnson is non-binary queer author, and when I talked about this book in my TBR, I described it as kind of a blend between fiction and memoir. It's just a memoir, and it's really quite good. A really, I think, important look at the life of a non-binary queer young person growing up in an incredibly supportive and understanding family and community, and still, the struggles that Johnson had to go through are, I think, extraordinary. And I think that any young person who was going through anything similar to what Johnson went through, who had the feelings or the ideas about their gender, their sex, or sexuality, would benefit from reading this book. It is incredibly well done and incredibly insightful. All Boys Aren't Blue is one of the most banned books in the current mania we have, or All Boys Aren't Blue. Can't get that title right, is one of the most banned books in kind of the mania we have for banning books that have anything remotely to do with the LGBTQ plus community, particularly those involving trans and non-binary people. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was well done. I think it should be read. I think it should definitely be available. The second book I read is actually a carryover from Trans Girl April, and that was a book of short stories by a Canadian trans author, Plett, which I'd started reading in April and read the first 2 stories. And when I talked about those first 2 stories in this collection, A Safe Girl to Love, I talked about them being kind of a gut punch, because it really is they really are just powerful, emotional, raw looks at the experience of being a trans woman in a community of people you know, in a community of people you don't know, issues involving safety, love, dating, friends, family are all in these stories, as is true with almost every short story collection. I think everybody who reviews any short story collection says essentially the same thing. As is true with any short story selection, some of the stories here are very good, and some of them are I thought most of the stories here were solid. There's several very long stories. One story over 50 pages, one over, I believe, 35 pages. And both those I thought were okay. There is one story involving a cat, which I didn't care for, and there's some of the shorter ones that I didn't think really necessarily worked, but overall I thought the stories were really good. If Plett has one weakness, I think, as a writer, it is in dialogue. There was a lot of the dialogue in a few of the stories, not in all of them, but a few of the stories that really felt clunky to me. To counterbalance that, I think Plett does a great job of capturing emotion and in portraying the issues, the struggles that trans people face. And I thought the collection was good overall. I think definitely well worth reading. Then I started reading 2 more books from my Pride TBR, my Pride Month TBR. One is Room with a View by Forster. I just barely got started on that, and I'm reading that on my Kindle. And then I remembered that I had not included on my TBR a book by Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is a non-binary author, and they write all kinds of books: fantasy, fiction, science fiction, and in the case of the book I'm reading right now, Just Like Home, horror. And I really like Sarah Gailey's work. It always feels to me like Gailey has gotten the idea for her book from somewhere else, and is kind of putting her own spin and riffing on an idea that's out there in popular culture. In Just Like Home, it's kind of a kid goes back home dealing with parents and parental issues and abuse and all kinds of terrible things that have happened. And that's not an original storyline, but I always find that Gailey puts an original spin on her work. And so I'm about 80 pages from being done. It's really pacey. I'm really liking it. I don't read a lot of horror, thriller kind of novels, so this has been really good for me. And I should finish that up probably by the time you're watching this. I will have finished that. So that's kind of where I am. I'm also still reading Tomb of Sand, which is a carryover from May. Tomb of Sand by Geetanjahli, Schree, translated from Hindi by Daisy Rockwell, which won the International Book Award a couple of years ago. I'm struggling a bit with it. It's not that I don't enjoy it. It's not that I don't think it's very, very good. There's some really beautiful scenes. It's just that I'm not sure it's my kind of book, and I want to talk more about this later on, but I am kind of struggling with it, kind of have hit a wall about halfway through, but I do hope to be able to get back to that. I've been reading a lot of books on my Kindle that I'm getting through the Libby app, and a lot of them come in all at once. I just got Fingersmith by Sarah Waters on the Libby app. I'm reading Sarah Gailey's book through the Libby app, and so I have a lot of books stacked up there, and I really got to get on with reading that. By the way, I forgot to mention that All Boys Aren't Blue is actually a book I listened to as an audiobook, again, through the Libby app. If you have access to a library app, if you have a library card, you really should check it out. A great, great resource that exists. So that's pretty much my reading right now, and kind of give you an idea of what I hope to finish up before the end of next week. Also, I'm sure most of you are aware that former President Donald Trump was indicted by a Florida grand jury at the request of special counsel Jack Smith, who'd been investigating his handling of classified and government documents, which he illegally kept at his home, Mar-a-Lago, and other places. The indictment was just unsealed today, and it's really damning. And the penalties it carries are fairly high. I can't see any way that President Trump isn't guilty, but the thing I want to talk about today is the rule of law and its importance. No one, according to the rule of law, is supposed to be above the law. That if anybody is above the law, if the law doesn't apply to everybody, then we don't have true equality. And this is the ultimate test of this. We are talking about a former president who, has declared himself a candidate for president again in 2024. None of those things should put him above the law. He should be investigated, as should any and every president, and who is accused of doing anything wrong. That's the rule of law, and we cannot pick and choose when we want to listen to or apply the rule of law. It should apply equally to Trump, to Biden, and to all government officials, elected or appointed, should fall under the rule of law. While if you watch this channel, you know that I absolutely detest Donald Trump. I think he was the worst president in the history of the United States, and I happily voted for Biden and was gleeful when Biden won, in large part because I thought that protected the U.S. democracy from its trend towards authoritarianism. While that's true, all these things we hear about President Biden and his family and making money, and even Hunter Biden's laptop, all those things should be investigated. To me, that's the importance of the rule of law, that everything should be scrutinized. We should hold our elected officials, particularly our presidents, to an incredibly high standard of not breaking the law. And I think it's clear here that Trump has violated that. And this has become a really partisan thing. In the Trump era, which is what I'm going to call everything from about 2016 to today, in the Trump era, we've had 3 special counsels appointed to investigate issues involving the president. There was the Bob Mueller probe into Trump and Russia. There was the Durham probe into where the FBI dealt with or handled their investigation of Donald Trump properly, and now we have Jack Smith's investigation of Trump and the handling of documents, and also continuing on to, I believe, his behavior in and around January 6th to see if he broke any laws there. Those are incredibly important investigations, and we don't get to pick and choose which ones we listen to. As a liberal, I believe that Mueller proved that Donald Trump had obstructed justice in trying to block his efforts to investigate the connection between Trump and Russia. And by the way, the connection between Trump and Russia has a lot, it goes far beyond whatever was in the Steele dossier. By the same token, I think that just because Durham was appointed by Bill Barr, Trump's handpicked Attorney General, I think we have to take seriously his report that the FBI did not follow proper procedures and they took shortcuts and they may have had some political motivation. I think we have to take that seriously. Now, importantly, no recommendations for prosecution came from that or even any real changes. But we do have to take it seriously. It doesn't completely disprove the idea that there was some kind of connection between the Trump campaign and Russia. I think the evidence of that exists, as I said, far beyond the Steele dossier. But by the same token, then, we have to take Jack Smith's investigation and the indictments that come against Trump seriously. There is no more, important trust, I think, that a president has than to keep national security matters secret. And if you read the indictment and you look at the pictures, there's no way Trump did that. And on top of that, he willfully, illegally maintained possession of classified documents, which he cannot just classify because he thinks, okay, they're just classified. That's not how that works, and he knows that. But this is a really important moment in American history, and it's going to carry on well into 2024 because the trial really won't even take place until sometime in 2024. So it'll be interesting and a little terrifying to see how that goes. So the last thing I want to talk about is I just wanted to kind of talk about music here because this is one of those things I do on my channel from time to time on Saturday Hodgepodge. And I was listening, my wife and I were in the car last weekend, as you may know, and I was listening to the radio and I believe at least one or two ACDC songs came on. And I thought to myself, ACDC is one of those bands that's just so ubiquitous. I think that sometimes we take them for granted. And so I wanted to give a little shout out to ACDC as one of the truly great hard rock bands that existed and has had a tremendous amount of influence despite the relative simplicity and traditional rock and roll style of their songs. One of my favorite stories revolving around ACDC has absolutely nothing to do with the members of ACDC themselves, but instead the members of a band called Yes. Yes, one of the great prog rock bands of the 1970s. In the 1980s, Steve Howe, the guitarist for Yes, had left the band, and Yes was essentially interviewing new guitarists to take his place. One of those was a man named Trevor Rabin, and when Rabin and Chris Squire and other members of the band got together, kind of as a tryout, they were sitting around thinking about what songs they could play, and they just started playing AC/DC songs. You Shook Me All Night Long and Back in Black. And, these were songs they all, enjoyed, they all knew. And I thought, well, that's kind of a remarkable statement about AC/DC. So here are my top 5 AC/DC songs. Number 5 for me is Jailbreak from the album Jailbreak 74, a song that I really liked and had that album on cassette. Album I like that. I think Thunderstruck for the guitar riff at the beginning, just kind of an amazing kind of build up to a song. You hear it a lot at sporting events. 3, Highway to Hell, just kind of classic, good old-fashioned rock and roll song. 2, Back in Black, no surprise there. And number 1, You Shook Me All Night Long, one of the great dirty rock songs in rock and roll history. Anyway, there you go. There's my Saturday Hodgepodge for this week. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.